Hey, what up? This is Zach Guilford from Midnight Mass, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Pop Culture Pastor.
Pop Culture Pastor.
So Cody, this El Nino is really kicking our behinds, as it's gonna be hot. It's hot all week. Are you familiar with El Nino?
The boy?
Spanish for the Nino. By the way, how iconic was Chris Farley that every time we bring up a real scientific phenomenon of the earth, we have to reference that joke?
I mean, I'd rather think about Chris Farley than how hot it's going to be.
I would rather not think about Chris Farley because it makes me sad.
I mean, it makes me sad, but there were plenty of laughs, and I can always cherish the good times.
Yeah. I don't know. We should probably do an episode about the curse of being very talented. Because why is it always the mega talented who struggle like that and get into drugs or something, some sort of addiction? It just seems like it's the mega talented that happens at a higher percentage to. Is that a thing, or does it just seem that way?
I think, especially when you get into like conversations about like with music in the 27 Club, not all those people are really that talented. It's just there's a potential that, they were going to be the next best thing for a decade, but their life was cut very short.
You're talking about Kurt Cobain, aren't you?
I am not listing who I am talking about in particular.
Side note, Nirvana was overrated, right? Is Nirvana overrated? Like, just come out and say it. It's okay. Come to the dark side, Cody. Make everybody mad.
I was more of a Pearl Jam guy, but I think that with especially actors that pass away young, we think about what could have been, and we put a lot of pressure on them. Like there's been people that I thought, this person's going to be huge, and then like their career really kind of fizzles out. Yeah. Either by their choice or by not getting casted in anything. And
I'm still a little raw from Rolling Stone naming Nirvana the act of the decade of the 90s, when they weren't a thing for half the 90s, because
they weren't.
I mean, I get that I just was, because it felt like the 90s are full of iconic type. Chris Farley. We just were talking about Chris Farley. But even in music, like the early 90s are just dominated by rap. Dr. Dre, Death Row Records, which, again, only half the decade probably. Anyways, I just remember that being a big deal to me back then. But like Nirvana, they're overrated.
Honestly, the second half of the 90s, you could list a boy band that probably sold more records, did way bigger tours, and boom.
Yeah. That's a good point as well. That's a very good point. You could have said NSYNC.
Which, that new Trolls movie.
Oh gosh, that looks terrible.
But I do love that they make jokes all about Justin Timberlake being in NSYNC, without specifically like saying it.
When I saw that trailer before one of the movies we got to view in the past week that we're going to talk about today, I thought it was a joke. I'm like, no, this is not a real movie.
It's happening.
Oh, it looks so bad. So bad. Yeah, good.
Day,
good whatever time you're listening
evening,
to this, because it's a podcast.
Morning.
Hello. Greetings.
And salutations.
My name is Dave. Cody's here.
I am.
And we are Pop Culture Pastor, and we have commenced this meeting in the one and only time for Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
Of which you will hear our thoughts coming up later in the pod.
Amazing thoughts.
Amazing thoughts. I'll tell you what, it's definitely a unique thing, but we'll get to all that.
Literally, I've been trying to like go through previous like movie weekends where like they've released 2 big hits at once, and my mind was coming blank.
Yeah, this might have saved some movie companies, to be honest.
Looking at you, Warner Brothers, you're back.
Yeah, this might have
Temporarily.
saved some things, because the mania, I don't know if you can find another. I don't know if this has ever happened like this before. The mania of what these 2 movies coming out together did. It was just a perfect storm. And we'll get to all that when we talk about it. But first, we have a couple news items.
The news.
How many concerts, Cody, would you say you've been to?
Are we talking like legitimate acts? Or are we talking like, the small town band is rolling through there?
Concerts are concerts, bro.
Oh, north of 50.
Yeah. A lot of concerts. I feel like I've been to a lot of concerts. What I haven't been to as many as my younger days, of course, are before the times of people with their smartphones with the video capabilities.
Yes.
Right? So the bulk of my concerts are before that time. But I've been to concerts during this time, and now you just see tons and tons of people with their phones out, videoing part of the concert, videoing themselves, whatever. And so that's why when I came across this news item from this past week, I was very confused. And we should say it comes from the realm of country music, which this isn't even the biggest story. The happiest person on the planet that Jason Aldean is Miranda Lambert, in my opinion, because this was the big story until Jason Aldean.
Within my heart of hearts, this was really a no story, but
yeah, what we're about to talk about?
yes,
This is a non-story to you. Her behavior at her concert, you don't have a problem with this.
not really.
Okay. I think it's super weird.
I mean, is it a bit odd, and especially in the time and age we're in? Yes. But I'll let you read the story. Okay. I'll give my thoughts. And then Vanilla Ice had thoughts.
Vanilla Ice had thoughts. Boy, can't wait to hear this. Miranda Lambert halted a concert last week to scold some fans who were paying more attention to their selfies than her performances, according to EW Magazine. During a rendition of Tin Man at her Las Vegas residency, so she has a Las Vegas residency. This isn't like a tour. The country singer instructed her band to pause the music and then motioned to the fans to put their cell phones away. This is her quoting her right now, quoting Miranda Lambert. "I'm going to stop right here for a second. These girls are worried about their selfie and not listening to the song, and it's pissing me off a little bit. I don't like it at all. We're here to hear some country music tonight. I'm singing some country music." The dressing down earned hearty applause from the crowd, which, of course it would.
Yeah!
Prompting Lambert to take the song again from the top. Now, number one, let's just get this out of the way. First and foremost, I'm a fan of concerts for things like this because you get little imperfections that I find to be unique. I've been at concerts where musicians made a mistake or something. They didn't like the way the song started and stopped the song and restarted, which some people would be like, no, I don't like that. No, I like that. I like uniqueness. That's why I like concerts of my favorite bands. However, this one, and I'm gathering you're going to have a different take. this is weird to me when artists get like this, because I think there's been things like this before, and of course I can't remember anything, but where we're taking what we do a little too seriously. I mean, like, for instance, the fact that she would do this while also be at a residency in Vegas, like, you've kind of already commercialized your art form by taking a residency in Vegas. Like, that's what a residency in Vegas is. You're like packaging it and mass producing it, and because you're basically on tour, but only in the place you have a residency in Vegas. And it's sort of like saying to the world, hey, I am commercializing my art form. I'm packing it in little boxes and wrapping it in cellophane and selling it to you. And I guess my point is, it's like she wasn't on the stage at the Grand Ole Opry, right? She wasn't doing acoustic sets in small venues and labeling it an artistic performance, right? This is a commercialized, packaged type thing. And selfie culture is taken over everything. Like, and it's not a new thing. There are people who post 20 selfies a day on their social media, and the more interesting the backdrop, the better. I'm just super confused. Also, it's not that they were being a distraction. They weren't distracting anybody. People take selfies everywhere.
So I have a question.
Okay.
Let's pretend it's Elton John at this residency. Let's pretend he's performing Candle in the Wind. Are you going to have a problem with someone taking a selfie during that?
No, I wouldn't, but I sense your straw man argument, because that to me is a different issue. Would Elton John garner more respect than Miranda Lambert did? Sure. Is that right and fair? No.
Because for Miranda Lambert, this is like a very intimate, and it probably would have been more of an acoustic sound, this song, than like her typical Rest catalog, which, like, I guess is rock and country. But this is a more bare bones, like, intimate. You get a look behind the curtain of, hey, I'm broken, Tin Man. Here's me. And so the way the venue set up, because I've seen the selfie, I'm like, well, this doesn't look like a concert hall. Like, so it could.
You've seen the selfie in question that's out there?
Well,
have these people been outed?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like, I've seen, like, there's a picture of them, like, from someone else's perspective. So someone else was either recording the concert or they were taking a picture of Miranda Lambert as she's singing this song. And then here's these three ladies. And so, yeah, no, they're out. And one of them's responded, like, I'm never seeing Miranda Lambert again. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't either. She called you out, jabroni.
Okay, it's fair, but also I'm placing before the pop culture pastor court that Miranda Lambert is also a jabroni.
She might be.
In a time when concert goers are doing stupid things like throwing things at the performer. Like, that's a thing. That's a trend. And I don't know if that's a TikTok trend or whatever.
BB Rexa got hit in the face.
Yeah, she had to get stitches. So at a time when people are really doing dumb things, like, look, okay, full stop. Let's just stop the pod right now. Full stop. Selfie culture is one of the dumbest things, I think, in our world today. I don't understand it. I don't get, like, you know, the people that take 80 pictures of themselves a day. I don't understand. Okay? So I'm not here to defend the selfies, but I get that it's a part of society, right? Just because I don't get something doesn't give me the right, like, okay, they weren't even taking a picture of Miranda. Like they were just this is how especially young people document that they did something fun and big together.
So I think any other song, she's probably not doing it. This song, I think Miranda puts a reverence to, and which I think a chunk of her audience would say, oh, yeah, like this one you should just be listening to.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fair. Let's talk about the song has special meaning. Has Bruce Springsteen ever stopped a concert to chide his fans when he does Born in the USA and they receive it in completely the wrong way that he wrote the song, which they have for years?
Looking at you, Ronald
for
Reagan.
Sure probably take selfies during the concert.
Not to my knowledge.
And Bruce Springsteen's a pretty artsy guy.
Very.
Like, if this would have been the same story and it would have been Bruce Springsteen, I wouldn't have been surprised at all. I'd have been like, that fits.
That fits his character. Honestly, this kind of fits Miranda Lambert's character because she'll.
Oh, okay. Does it? I don't really know.
She's a little more saucy with her comments about people and things. And so, like, I could see her taking things personally.
Okay.
Now, I did tease a little bit that my friend Vanilla Ice had comments.
So what did Vanilla Ice say? Because people did have thoughts.
So my friend Vanilla Ice, currently performing at Atlantic City, said in front of a crowd.
Is he really?
Yes.
Nice.
He said, and I quote, "Take all the selfies you want during my concert." And which is in regards to Miranda Lambert saying, "Don't take this selfie during my song." But I think Vanilla Ice is like, hey, I want you to remember I'm still alive. Come see me.
Yeah, right. Like, well, it's Vanilla Ice. He's probably wanting anyone and everyone to document that he's still around.
Yes.
LL Cool J had thoughts. If we actually move up the hip hop ladder,
Hey, look at us.
he was on a radio show, Odyssey's Mix 94.1 radio show. And they asked him if he'd ever stopped to chastise fans for taking pictures in the middle of a performance. He said, no. And then he said, Miranda, get over it, baby. He even threw in a little, male chauvinistic by throwing a baby on that.
That is bold, LL.
He said this. He went on to say, let me tell you something about art. And I say this with love. The artist, your job as an artist is to create art. The way people choose to interact with that art or engage it or appreciate it is up to them. Now, okay, so he was a little cheeky at first, and I could have done without that. But then he says something that we actually talk about a lot. It's like, yeah, I think sometimes the artist, and this translates to a lot of different things, artists get in trouble with this idea that the art is, once they release it out into the world, that it's still theirs. And I think that's the hard part for the artist, because that may be a special song, an intimate song for Miranda, but she doesn't get to choose how people receive that art. You know what I'm saying?
Unless she becomes Banksy, who's like, oh, you removed the cover off this frame? Art gets shredded.
We should do a show on that sometimes, because Banksy is kind of genius and brilliant in that way, in the fact that I'm still going to own this art.
Yeah.
So that was...
Maybe Miranda's trying to be the Banksy of country music.
LL went on to say, if you want to come to my show and you want to sit there and eat a bowl of potato salad with a baseball hat down to your nose, that's what you choose to do. Like, first of all, that I could see myself doing that at an LL show. He went on, you've got to let the fans do what they want to do. What about the thousands of people who aren't doing that? What are their rules? He had, quote, nothing unkind to say about her and wishes Lambert the best. She has the right to her feelings, but for me, I let the fans be fans and do what they want to do.
She sells roses, by the way.
Who?
Miranda Lambert. Like,
that's her merchandising, huh? She's a flower person.
Walmart used to sell Miranda Lambert roses.
Well, yeah. I don't know.
You're welcome for this.
I think the bottom line for me is Miranda Lambert, especially with that information, has clearly marketed her music. So I would argue, if her point is that these people taking selfies, these young girls are taking selfies during this like intimate personal art, I would argue, Miranda, you've already devalued your art by marketing it the way you have. You're doing a residency in Vegas, which, you know, the other big name doing that is Britney Spears. So take that how you will.
It was Shania for
but
a
it's
while.
following in the footsteps of Elvis, who took a pure art form such as the blues and rock and roll and such and mass produced it. Like, the argument could be made to Miranda, like, you've already devalued and changed what your art is. And she had to deal with Walmart. So, like, yeah, I guess that's my point. My point is, hey, let's look in the mirror before you talk about people who paid to see your concert devaluing your art. That's all.
I'm going to stay slightly Team Miranda.
Okay.
Not like, oh, you get all my support. You just get a little bit of empathy.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Depending on the situation, I reserve the right to swing back to the artist. But in this one, I think she could have said the same thing in a way that did not out specific concert goers. Is in this day and age where I was surprised that they've been outed, but now that I'm thinking about it, why would I be surprised about that? Of course they were going to be identified. And they probably, like, look, the weird thing is like, okay, when we were young, Cody, we would have been decimated if an artist we loved and went to see their concert outed us during a concert. That would have destroyed us when we were young. But these days, it's probably a badge of honor, and you probably get a lot of followers, which is what we really want now.
I don't want that. So, Bono, do not out me at a concert.
That's because we're old, and even though we're not, we'd be referred to as boomers. Oh, we know you don't care about followers, boomer. That's
Ouch.
that's what they'd say.
Rude. Rude.
See, that is the millennial response. Ouch, rude. Whereas my generation, the Gen X response would be, whatever. I don't care. Whatever. Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. Are you watching that at all?
I'm not a Trekkie.
You're not a Trekkie?
Like, I mean, I've watched the movies. I've seen bits and pieces of Picard's original Star Trek run many moons ago. But, like, I don't go out of my way for Star Trek. It doesn't, like, if you have to choose between Star Trek and Star Wars, as some within the fandoms would have you do, I'm definitely choosing Star Wars. Kick rocks, Treks.
Okay.
But
That's fair.
I'm not anti-Star Trek, and so I will say, hey, you keep doing your thing, Star Trek.
I always thought that you have to choose between you're either one or the other. It's like the Rolling Stones or the Beatles. Well, I mean,
And that's when we choose the Who.
they're both good. I mean, I can listen to both.
Sorry, I've already chosen the Who.
The Who, really?
Yes.
Okay, so if someone said you could never listen to the bands you don't pick of these three, you're picking the Who. Like, no disrespect. But again, I feel like this is a weird thing. Like, nah, I'll listen to all three. They're good. Although the Who's clearly a distant third. Put next to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
The Who would be a strong second, probably behind the Beatles.
Ooh.
The Stones have like 5 legit hits and then several songs after that I would keep listening to.
That is shocking Rolling Stone slander.
Well,
That is shocking.
when Keith Richards
Richards.
is at my funeral, because the man will live forever, he
Methuselah Richards.
he will say, well, I have more hits than you, jabroni. And then that will be the end of the service.
So I am not watching Star Trek Strange New Worlds, although I've had people tell me I need to. Apparently it's good. I've seen every Star Trek movie. I've seen every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Somewhere along, I started watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine when it came out, but I lost interest at some point because it just wasn't what I was wanting. And I always enjoyed Star Trek, though. Star Trek Next Generation was really one of my favorite shows. And I enjoyed that it was different than Star Wars. It was more of a political show.
Mm-hmm.
There was that intrigue that really wasn't a part of Star Wars.
And now it's all Star Wars is about.
Yeah, and I don't like it. But maybe, yeah, that's because my Star Trek fandom kind of played out. Anyways, I'm not watching Strange New Worlds. And again, I've been told I probably should be. But they announced at Comic-Con that they are having an all music episode. Cody, why do shows do this?
Because I think it highlights the abilities of your cast and of your writers if the episode lands. So often when we do the musical episode, it's like, this is awkward or this is trash.
It usually does not work.
Scrubs, I really did love the all musical episode. It landed for me. But the songs were quite witty and funny. And like they weren't expecting Zach Braff to sound like Elton John. So like they stuck within the range of their talent. And so again, I think there's a way you can do it. And since like I'm not really recalling Star Trek ever doing musical numbers.
No, this will be this will be the first time.
YOLO. You got this, Star Trek.
I feel like it's a shameless attempt to just, highlight that that actors are talented. They have talents in other places, and
because whenever there's music, there's almost always dance.
Yeah, it's just weird to me. It's weird. Like Grey's Anatomy did it, didn't they do this? The all music episode.
Did not watch
The
that,
Flash did it, and it's just super weird to me. Like, especially when it doesn't really fit with your show. Like with Scrubs, that makes sense to me. A funny show, yeah. Do your funny musical episode. It's funny, right?
It was hilarious. Probably didn't age well, but it was hilarious.
I just find it really strange that these something do. And honestly, when I go back and rewatch a show and I'm binging a show on Netflix or whatever, a musical episode is an immediate skip. Because a few things. One, nothing that happens in this episode is going to be canon, or they're going to treat it like canon. Nothing ever, remotely important happens in an episode. It's just a goofy episode. It's sort of like the Community animated Christmas episode.
Loved it.
Nope, it's an immediate skip.
Loved it.
All right, that is our news for this time. Don't go anywhere, because when we come back, it's time for Barbenheimer.
You are listening to Pop Culture Pastor.
I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. The worst part about this movie being big is that there might be an Aqua reunion.
Yeah. We're back.
True story. I had a roommate and friend who was big into that song. And it just kind of, I was done with it.
Who wasn't?
Everybody else. Everybody. I mean, okay.
I think if you grew up with that song, you're like nostalgia.
His other, like this friend who shall remain nameless, I'm not going to out him like Miranda Lambert. But this friend who I won't out was also big into Chumbawamba.
I get knocked down.
Yeah, and they were also really, really one of their claims to fame. For if he was here, he would say my claim to fame is recognizing that the Spice Girls were going to be big before they were big. He was a Spice Girls fan.
This person sounds like they need to be on the podcast.
I would love to. It would be interesting to see if he would want to be on a podcast too, because like, I don't know if he has an interesting eclectic taste in everything, music, movies. But I'd have to ask. I don't even know if he listens to the pod. I guess here's how we'll do this. If my friend from the past, because we don't live in the same town anymore, but I love this man. He's one of my great old friends. If he's listening to this pod and he knows it's him, and who else could it be? Like I just said, he had big fandoms in Aqua and this song Barbie Girl. I remember listening to this song in his car. I also remember he was really into Tub Thumping and Chumbawamba, and he was a huge Spice Girls fan. So if you know this is you, then send me a message and tell me you're okay and would like to be on the pod and talk about your eclectic fandoms. You wouldn't be disappointed. He does. He always surprises me with what movies and things he likes and dislikes.
Noise.
Yeah, he's just one of those people. Probably everyone has a friend like that.
For some people, I might be that friend.
And it never annoyed me like it does with you when you disagree with me. It was always like charming with him. I'm just kidding. I love you, Cody. We're here to talk about Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
Cody, what does it all mean? Like, this is a big event. This turned out to be kind of big.
Literally, I told my church this. Like, I had been waiting for probably close to a year for this movie date.
Yeah.
And that I was hoping my wife would go with me to this. And she did. So, way to go, Leah. Hearts and stuff. But literally, I had been sitting on the edge of my seat for a whole year about this because I knew it was going to be epic, and I was not disappointed.
We've already said that we're not sure that this has ever happened before quite like this. There has to have been other weekends when there were two big movies out, especially during the summer. But I don't know if it's because Hollywood tends to arrange the schedule now in a way where big movies avoid other big movies on the calendar, and they'll move around if they do get too close. Mm-hmm. And so this is just a strange thing where I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that both of these movies fared way better together than they would have on their own if they were isolated. That it was this perfect storm that they're just so different in tone and feel that them coming out at the same time just it was like catching lightning in a bottle.
It was a beautiful paradox.
Barbie claimed the top spot in the box office this weekend with, this is unbelievable, $155 million in ticket sales in North America.
So that's the domestic. Because I saw the worldwide was bigger.
Worldwide's crazy. But that's domestic, and it puts it into a context we are more used to. 155 million passes Super Mario Brothers movie as the biggest opening of the year domestically. And it breaks the first weekend record for a film directed by a woman, Greta Gerwig.
Way to go, Greta.
This is like Hall of Fame type stuff we're talking about here. I mean, this is not a small opening. This is a big deal.
And the amazing thing is, if I told you while these two movies are debuting this weekend, there is an Indiana Jones movie that's still in theaters, and there's a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie that just debuted last week.
Poor Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible. It got buried, bro.
It had a black and white pink tsunami roll through it and destroy it.
Universal's Oppenheimer also soared past expectations, taking in $80 million domestically, U.S. and Canada. $80 million for a 3-hour R-rated biopic. That is nuts. That is insane. Marks Nolan's biggest non-Batman debut and one of the best ever opening weekends for an R-rated biopic.
Evidently, The Passion of the Christ had a bigger one.
It is also the first time that one movie opened to more than 100 million and another movie opened to more than 80 million in the same weekend.
I was a part of history. Mark it on your calendars, folks.
We were. I wonder how many of you actually did the Barbenheimer? How many of you made it a point to go out and see both movies? Hopefully a lot of you, if you're listening to this pod, although I don't know where you're at with this, but I don't think we're going to get into heavy spoilers.
I'm going to spoil the ever-loving nerd out of it.
Cody, gosh, why does everything have to be a fight with you?
That's how I roll.
Yeah, you might want to see both movies. I don't intend to share it. Although, look, neither one of these movies have shock twists. You probably know what you're getting into when you walk into the theater for these movies.
If you don't know about Oppenheimer, I'm sorry.
I could tell you the whole story of Oppenheimer right now, and it would not diminish your enjoyment of the movie. I'm sure. Because listen, you need more time to talk about the subject, that moment in history, than we're going to talk about it right here. You're going to need more time to process all of it. This weekend will likely turn out to be the 4th biggest box office weekend of all time.
Yeah.
Says the AP, with over 300 million industry-wide. And this is a big deal. So the Barbenheimer phenomenon, the AP says, may have started out as a good-natured competition between two aesthetic opposites. But as many hoped, both movies benefited in the end. I think that's very true.
So aesthetically, they might be opposites, but there's a lot of weird connection between the two for me.
Yeah.
I'll say.
You're saving that for later, though. You're going to talk about that in a bit. I think if we're saying what does it all mean, and by the way, this movie review is going to have a little different kind of tone because it's
a double feature.
It stands alone, right? Nothing like this before. The sad thing would be to watch Hollywood try to do this, duplicate this. If I'm a movie, if I know movie studio heads, I think I do, there's meetings happening this week, all the major studios that are how can we get 2 movies, release them at the same time that are intellectual opposites and catch lightning in a bottle again. They're really going to do that instead of, hey, let's make good movies, which they should be doing. This is going to be the talk, and I'm looking at you, Warner Brothers. This may have single-handedly saved Warner Brothers' studio, and I know for a fact that they've had a meeting this week that went down something like this. How can we do this again? But we do both movies.
So the next opportunity would be whoever's opening opposite of the Hunger Games prequel.
Oh, gosh. Really?
So that's if I'm a studio head, instead of having this young adult fiction book fandom, I would go can we release something Stephen King at this point? Or can we release something like John Wick 7? I'm going complete opposite and then seeing if we can capitalize off both of these. Although, the actors in the Hunger Games prequel aren't quite as big as the actors in the actual.
I would argue to you that nobody cares about Hunger Games anymore.
We'll see, because I think that's the last big box office for the year.
Yeah, not the Marvels.
Nope.
Does this real talk? What does this do, especially amid the current state of comic book movies that had been the biggest deal in movies for the last, I don't know, 10 years? What does this do to the comic book movie? Does this damage? Are things changing, or is this just a minor off ramp?
I did see a lot of journalists and like other pods talk about how this box office weekend, along with Super Mario's box office opening weekend, highlights, especially when you do a contrast of most of the comic book movies that have come out this year, the new Indiana Jones movie, that were either not so much about the sequels, or that the sequels they're putting out or the connective universe stuff that they're putting out is not quality, and we don't care to watch it if it's not quality, and it's obvious that it's not going to be quality. Like everything that I've heard about Aquaman 2, if I'm Warner Brothers, I save face. I shelved that bad boy, and it is just lost to the sands of time because it sounds like trash. And the first one, like, storytelling wasn't necessarily what it was great at. What it was great at was its visuals. And like the story wasn't bad. It was just, it's Jason Momoa in like underwater Star Wars graphics, and it's okay. But the second one is way worse, and the first one wasn't great. Don't even bother putting it out. I don't want to watch it.
The interesting thing about that is this movie, Barbie, may give Warner Brothers the option of doing that, of just shelving that. Like, I would say they weren't in a position to do that before Barbie. They're like, man, they've got to put this out and hope it just makes a few bucks. Which I don't know if it would have, given what had just happened with The Flash for them.
Oh, yeah, no. And they've done reshoots. I don't know why they keep reshooting.
Yeah,
you stop it.
Stop doing reshoots. It's not going to help it. But this movie actually may give them the option, since it's going to make them a lot of money, of scrapping Aquaman 2, which, yes, please. Just stop. It's just, at this point, you're just damaging the brand that you're getting ready to reboot.
Mm-hmm.
So don't do it, because you might be in a situation where the really interesting thing for me right now is, has Marvel damaged their brand? So like, it's weird that we're getting this in all these little different phases, because I would say Star Wars is in a place right now where they're just realizing how much they damaged the brand with some of their stuff. Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, which, no matter how you feel, The Last Jedi is so weirdly like lightning rodish, where it causes extreme feelings on either side. Mm-hmm. But I think looking back, you can say now it definitely damaged the brand. I don't think you can argue that, because it was so one way or the other. Divisive. Yeah. Someone said it was the most divisive Star Wars movie ever. And I agree with that. And it's so divisive that I think, and then the reaction to it, which was Rise of Skywalker, was so bad. Oof. It was such a bad call on their part that I think it damaged the brand.
It damaged my J.J. Abrams stock.
Yeah. So Warner Brothers is in a place now where they can really take a look at this and try to learn from that and say, hey, we're making a lot of money with Barbie. Let's shelve Aquaman and let's do the same thing we did with the Batwoman.
So I think original content, new, fresh ideas, because this Barbie wasn't like anything that like had been, because there's been multiple attempts at making this movie. Amy Schumer was supposed to write and star in it. And that didn't happen. But every attempt, like, there's been leaked out bits of stuff, and like none of it sounded like what we saw this weekend, which was far better than what I think the other attempts would have been. So
Yeah. And so we have this kind of historic thing. You have a movie like Oppenheimer that's, hey, it's a drama, it's a biopic, and it may be one of the best biopics of all time.
I'll say it.
It's very serious and weighty material. And then there's Barbie, which, could have gone a bunch of different ways. But what it ends up going is dramedy, I would say, but more importantly, satire.
Oh, yeah.
Which I will just say it like, look, saying this opposite of Chris Nolan movie is going to sound weird, but I actually think the degree of difficulty for what Barbie is trying to do, what Greta Gerwig was trying to do, is actually higher. And we'll get into that later when we, talk about where we're rating these movies, because I'm going to give Barbie a rating, but then I'm also going to qualify it by saying I think what they were trying to do with this movie is difficult. It's difficult to stick the landing. It's a degree of difficulty score, if you will.
Mm-mm.
So Barbie, and it on the surface, Barbie appears to be a goofy, silly, thin movie, but it's really not.
It has a lot of Ken-ough.
Am I Ken-ough?
Are you?
So let's just get into this. We're going to change our categories a little bit just for the sake of, doing something different because it's Barbenheimer. First thing we're going to talk about, what did they have in common?
That's a good question.
Yeah. What?
I have a whole list.
Okay. I do too. Do you want to go first?
Okay, I got this.
Yeah. All right.
Say no to fascist.
No fascists. All right.
Literally, both movies did use the term fascist, and they were very anti-fascist, as you should be.
Fits with our current context and culture.
It does. Existential dread, existentialism thoughts, and they're in both.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to? You're just gonna move on.
I'll list them, and then if there's anything in particular you really want to talk about, then we'll dive into those.
Okay.
And then
sure.
If I miss something, then you throw out your cool list. So both Barbie and Oppenheimer, yes, they're smart, but they're good facilitators. Both of them. Actually, the thing I walked away from with Oppenheimer was he really did a lot of facilitation.
Explain. What do you mean?
He empowered others to do the work. He wasn't the
okay.
He's like, oh, you ran this calculation, okay. You came up with this theory, sweet. Okay, I'm going to keep empowering you guys to do your own thing, and I'm going to advocate for you, and I'm going to be the great facilitator that will then put this all together in a nice little bundle.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Oppenheimer is a great leader because that's what great leaders do. You get people around you, and then you use their talents and what they are gifted to do.
My friend Barb's does that as well, especially when they have to take over Kinland or whatever it was at that point.
Because, well, and then I don't know that it was this way in Barbie, but in Oppenheimer, they're in the middle of a desperate race. And so it had to be him.
Barbie was a desperate race.
It had to be him, but it's also what gets him in trouble. It's also what opens him up to that time and climate.
And then the last thing is where we find our value, self-worth, or identity. Because Barbie struggles with that through the whole movie. Oppenheimer struggles with that, especially when he is about to get his credentials removed. And also when he's even being selected for this project that well, you're saying I can't go to this political group's events. I can't do this. I can't do that. Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's an interesting part of Oppenheimer where they're kind of eviscerating him, the government. And part of what they use as ammunition is that he's a narcissist. that he,
Word.
you know, his identity is in like kind of the glory of who he is. And it's an interesting part of the movie because he admits to it. He acknowledges it. And yeah, it's hard to not see that with Oppenheimer. That's what makes him such an interesting character in history. And the movie shows this well, that he gets, they ask him there's a weird, like kind of the movie centers around this like sort of trial, but it's more of like a board meeting.
Yes.
And I'm not really sure how to classify it in a historical sense, other than that's literally what it was. He's on trials in a sense, but it's not a trial.
Yes.
And a lot of the narrative takes place in this room in the movie when you see it. But there's a very interesting part there where they question why it took him so long after the fact to really come out opposed to the nuclear policies, right? Of what the government was doing with it. And it's literally because he was enjoying the position of being important, being an important man, his narcissism and the glory of that, right? And he sort of, it sort of lands on him in this kind of scene in the movie that I thought was very fascinating. Because like, I think we've all been there. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we've been there where we're having to balance that we like being revered, we like getting respect, we like being affirmed, but then balancing it with, but I've also got to be someone who's about the right things too, and that sometimes doesn't always work together hand in hand very well.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's a good observation. The identity piece, more overtly in Barbie, but it's there in Oppenheimer for sure.
Oh yeah.
Here's the things I had on my list for what these two movies have in common. Insecure Men.
Yep.
Insecure Men is a high topic of both. Obviously, again, more overt in Barbie. The men in Barbie are hilariously insecure, but it works.
It's done for giggles.
I will say that there's a problem I have with the narrative in Barbie, and we'll get to that. But the brokenness of humans in general is a huge, huge topic in both movies, in my opinion. And it's one of those things. So here in Barbie, I feel like Barbie is, again, I think the degree of difficulty is harder to pull off. And that sounds weird, but they're doing satire. And one of the issues I have with Barbie is it's not, so all these political pundit type people, like who am I thinking of? The guy, the Republican guy who has his own network, Ben Shapiro.
Oh,
all these dudes are coming out and railing against Barbie. Listen, anyone who says, "Oh, this is just a feminist woke movie," they're not being fair. They're being dishonest about what they saw. Because that's not what the movie's about. And in fact, actually, Barbie approaches many deep themes. Because I was actually worried. I'm sitting in the theater, and the first quarter to third of the movie, you feel like it's going in a feminist direction. Like, oh, okay, women are awesome, men suck. That feels like the direction. And then she subverts it. You start going in this different direction. Barbie finds out that the matriarchy is doing this, has the same problems as the patriarchy, right? And that's where we start delving into these themes in Barbie of human brokenness and the brokenness of society, and how maybe, especially in this day and age where it's always someone's fault, where maybe this is unavoidable and it's nobody's fault. Right. And it starts going in all these different deep directions. And part of the reason I'm going to give Barbie my final score when we get to that, and it's a little bit lower than Oppenheimer's is because I feel like it just never delivers on the promise of these little other issues that are going on. I think Barbie gets kind of muddled in the last act, and then they give up and they go back to girl power. Right. Which, again, I think the degree of difficulty of what Greta Gerwig was trying to say and do is so much harder than what Christopher Nolan did. And I know that sounds weird. You look at Oppenheimer and you think, wow, what a highly technical achievement. And it is. But I'm actually here to say that I think the satire and the messaging of what Barbie was trying to say is actually more difficult to pull off.
It is. I will say that Oppenheimer, though, does put into light how flawed, how broken we are, especially when you're the character that the whole movie's based around is a very flawed, very broken man. You get this message in both about the brokenness of humanity, and also like, ooh, be careful when you judge. Especially in the case of Oppenheimer, because Strauss, played by RDJ, like this dude, smart dude, plans years ahead the downfall of J. Robert Oppenheimer, but also can't see the forest for the trees because it also leads to his downfall. But like, he's like, oh, you humiliated me. Let me humiliate you right back, buddy, with a judgment of my own. And it backfires. And in Barbie, we do get some judgments, especially from the teen at first. She's like, Barbie's just a fascist, and that it's plastic, it's fake, it's lame, it changed nothing, you are trash, and like she just rails. And then you get the men at the board that are also very like anti the lady folk at first. And
Yeah.
so
Let's be real clear. Will Ferrell being in the Barbie movie was a wrong turn in my opinion.
So, as someone that goes into any movie that features a William Ferrell, I had like very low expectations. And when we got out of the theater, I'm like, I think they actually used him a correct amount. And like for me, who is like, you show Will Ferrell and it's not like an Anchorman movie, I get soured just because like Will Ferrell is this bombastic, over the top caricature of a person in almost everything he does. And so he was that at times in this, not all the time, but at times. And like, I'm also really hesitant about casting SNL people.
Yeah.
I find as we get further removed from like the Sandler, Farley, Chris Rock days of SNL, I'm finding less and less SNL cast people that I would want to be in a movie that I want to be taken serious.
Yeah. For me, let me see if I can try to put this in words, because this is kind of hard, of why I thought Will Ferrell was maybe a mistake. Because what they're going for so Barbie goes to the real world, ends up in this boardroom of Mattel, and they play the Mattel board and everything about the real world to be absurd. They go absurdist with it, and I don't feel like that does justice to what they're trying to say. I think if they go ultra real, then it does more justice to what it is they're trying to say. Instead, she goes the absurdist route, probably for the laughs. That's why you put Will Ferrell in there. Mm-hmm. And for me, once I saw Will Ferrell, once he utters his first few lines, then to me, what you're trying to say gets lost under the idea of, hey, we want to make people laugh, which, look, that's a worthy endeavor in a movie. I just feel like this movie Barbie suffers from some weird contrasting visions that are inside the movie. And I think halfway through this movie, I deeply wanted Barbie to be this like really kind of deep and scathing satire hidden underneath some funny things and some absurd things. And it just never really got there for me. And part of it was in the introduction of Will Ferrell and the character he plays, surrounded by the characters in the real world. I found the real world in Barbie to not be the real world at all. Instead, an absurdist take on it.
Yeah. And I think that you would have to have, for Barbie to work out, I think you needed like either Barbie to meet the worst of the worst, if it's not necessarily a full-on absurdist take, like, oh, Barbie just happens to meet the worst people imaginable.
Yeah.
Or it had to go full absurdist to counteract, so that you could display like, oh, the problems with Barbie Land or Barbie World is the problems that we're facing in the real world. We don't often think about like our own death. We oftentimes don't think about like what our life's meaning is. We oftentimes do things without acting. We oftentimes are very self-centered and selfish, because every night's a girl's night, which is very rude to the other people that are not girls in Barbie, but that's neither here nor there.
Like here, let me try to spell this out a little bit. I think given the scenes that they have with Rhea Perlman, who plays the creator of Barbie, like some
Ruth Handler,
some real deep themes and things they're toying around with. It feels weird to me that Barbie ends up where it ends up, which is back on like this kind of girl power trope. Given, America Ferrera has this big speech near the end about all the girls all women deal with. And it's not like I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying it was weird. It was almost like Barbie they were making this movie that had a lot of deep things it wanted to say, and then it gets kind of muddled, like maybe they're trying to juggle too much, and then they give up and go back to the girl power thing. That's what it felt like to me. And I think part of that problem was because you do this absurdist comedic take on the real world and the men of the real world. So a good example is Will Ferrell, and like being the CEO or whatever he is of Mattel. Like there's a more interesting way you could have done this and show real sins of broken men in the real world, not this jokey absurdist quality. A good example is when Barbie shows up in the real world and gets catcalled by the construction workers, which Cody and I's first reaction to that was, who does that anymore? That was a thing that used to happen quite a bit. I grew up in the 80s and I witnessed catcalling, but are people still doing that?
The only people I have seen in my life that have done that, it's like Jersey Shore cast members. That's who.
Like, I know that it still happens, but not like that.
Yeah.
Like someone slaps her on the backside, which is assault literally in our culture today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just felt like it was such a jokey and absurd take, and something that maybe was almost a past take. I was like, did she go back to the 80s reality? Like 1980s? Like, because that feels like that doesn't happen like that anymore.
So that honestly would make some sense. Although, like, the rest of the real world's, like, buildings, the way people dress, their cars don't match the 80s. Because literally Ruth Handler is dead now. Like, she died several years ago. And so, like...
Well, they do refer to her as the ghost.
Yes.
That has an office in the building. It's just such a weird, absurdist... I don't know. For me, the messaging gets convoluted and it struggles under that weight. But underneath all that is if we go back to what these movies have in common, the brokenness of humanity. And Oppenheimer maybe plays that out a little better than what Barbie does. But again, I'm going to defend Barbie in a way that I think the degree of difficulty of what they were trying to do is a little bit harder. And I think you can see it bending under that weight. Another thing they have in common, life's a struggle, but it's worth fighting for.
Yeah. With Oppenheimer especially, I think Nolan does a good job of setting up, like, this really is inevitable. what's going to happen, that people are going to create the atomic bomb with or without Robert Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
But Oppenheimer, using his political savvy, which, like, it is amazing to see this transition from, like, someone that is more of, like, just the pursuit of scientific knowledge to he's almost a career politician at parts of the movie, like that switch in dynamics of who he has to become. But it's also in conjuncture with, I know that we literally could just be destroying the ever-loving nerd out of each other if someone doesn't try to rein this in.
Yeah, I think Oppenheimer in particular, I was disappointed with the nude scenes. This feels like a theme because we just got done talking about this with the beginning of Justified.
Or Defied, as I call it.
The what?
Defied.
Justified City Primeval, and then kind of just useless nude scene at the beginning of that show. Although I will say here in Nolan's movie, in Oppenheimer, the first scene could have done without completely. I don't know that it was necessary. The second scene has a very real thing that he's trying to do, and it's to transfer the discomfort of the wife, of Oppenheimer's wife, and Oppenheimer himself, trying to transfer the discomfort of that to the viewer.
And also the love or the passion he had for his the
mistress,
person that he was having an affair with.
And not his wife.
Not his wife. And it is amazing to see within this movie that, like, he wants her before he's married. He won Florence Pugh's character, but she didn't want anything to do with him, really. And she made it clear. And so he moves on, but yet he's not really fully moved on.
It wasn't that she didn't want anything to do with him, though. That's not fair. She did want his passion. She didn't want who he was, right?
She didn't want,
because she's the one who keeps calling him back. Right? She even says later on, the last time they're together, that she was hurt when he left.
Yes.
I mean, granted, he left with the U.S. military they weren't going to let him go places, right? I'm okay. Go on.
So
I think it's important to note that no, she wanted him. She just didn't want him completely.
Yeah, she didn't want the relationship. She just wanted the benefits of being in a relationship, it sounds like. But no, I do think that that scene did serve a purpose. And so because from all accounts, that's the scene that makes this movie rated R. Because you don't see really any death.
Yeah. It's super graphic, which is the part where I felt like it didn't have to go that far. I feel like you could have. So what it does first is Nolan does this camera trick where he's panning the camera and a character moves in front of your view in the foreground while it's panning, and when it pans the other side and you can see Oppenheimer again, he's naked, but only from the bust up, right? Because he's sitting in a chair. And I think that was effective at transferring that discomfort because you understand that he's being laid bare. He's the king without clothes, right? These men are just picking apart his life and who he is. So I think that could have been done without it. The reason I brought it up was because it's disappointing to me because I feel like this is a movie that young people should watch. And it is because you mentioned something earlier that this was always going to happen. So we do this thing in our culture today where is it good or bad? We judge everything, good or bad. Christopher Columbus is a great example. In our culture, he's either good or he's bad. Either one. And what I would say is like, no, he's human. He does some bad things, but any European that landed where he landed was going to do those things. And it was going to happen. Like eventually somebody was going to get there from the old world and do those exact same things. It was something that was always going to happen. And this is the same thing. This is Oppenheimer. The movie Oppenheimer is dwelling on this point in history where our technology intersects with our brokenness, our human brokenness, which is what these movies have in common. And that intersection was always going to happen. And this Oppenheimer just happens to be at this intersection, right? Sometimes when you're brilliant, you're a brilliant human. You're going to be the person at these intersections of humanity. And maybe that's the curse, that you get remembered. Like, look, you could say whatever you want about Christopher Columbus. What you can't argue is that he wasn't special, that he wasn't brilliant in some way. He's the first guy to convince some king and queen that he was the man for this job. And Oppenheimer is the same way. He's the first guy who convinces some ruling party that he's the guy for the job. And it turns out he is the guy for the job.
Matt Damon did a good job picking.
Yeah, he's successful, but then you also get to be the guy that lives at this intersection of human brokenness and technology, to be forever, for all time, a pariah of, and be the intersection of this question, is he good or bad? To which I would say he's neither. He's human. He's broken. And in that way, these movies explore human brokenness in a pretty profound way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was an amazing thing about both these movies. Like, here's the crazy thing is my list for what they have in common is more than my list of what they don't have in common, which the whole point of this phenomenon is that these movies were so diametrically opposed in tone that's what the popularity was. But here we find all these things they have in common.
It's a paradox.
It is. The next thing they have in common, the patriarchy. I shall seek my fortune there.
/ horses.
Yes. One of the best lines from either movie is that line from Ken. And Ryan Gosling, who was just amazing in Barbie. He's hilarious. For me, he was the best part of Barbie.
He brought the Ken-energy on that.
But that line, patriarchy. I shall seek my fortune there. So stinking hilarious. And it is. Like, listen, Oppenheimer's about the patriarchy too, right? The women in that movie are subjugated to their roles.
Well, I mean, literally, when we first meet Emily Blunt, she's married to someone not named Robert Oppenheimer. And she's like, I'm just a stay-at-home wife now. And, like, I have a degree to be a biology teacher. Like, I miss that possibility being stuck in this, and he doesn't even want anything to do with me, really. And so, like, throughout Robert Oppenheimer's climb to success, fame, and then falling off the face of the earth, she's there with him, but, like, you can tell that she either wants more or she wants him to have a significant position of power, because that's how they're measured in that society, that culture, that context.
Well, and he's just fine being the martyr in that trial. He's not fighting for himself. He's not doing it. And it's
You
her.
shook his hand?
Yeah, she's the one who ends up like fighting in that little courtroom, not courtroom, but closet trial / board meeting they're in. She's the one who stands up for them. She's the one who eviscerates the very capable prosecuting kind of lawyer.
Yes.
And she dresses him down, and she's the one who stands up and points out the reality of the situation, which is he's a scapegoat. You're just trying to transfer all of human brokenness onto him. And she's the one who fights. And by the way, we find is very capable of being more than just a housewife. Right?
Word. And she's also the one that doesn't shake hands during the retirement celebration party.
That was such an interesting scene where so it's interesting that she's painted as incapable of being a good mother.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they give away their baby at one point, pretty much. But first of all, side note, What was wrong with Oppenheimer's kids? They're always crying. What's going on there?
So for me, I took it as this being 1940s, postpartum probably isn't being treated or being treated well.
Right.
And so she's probably suffering from that. And so if you have postpartum, like you're going to be in more of a lower, like, I guess, more depressed state. And so anytime, like, the way you engage with people, including babies and children, it's going to influence the way they act and the way they respond. And so I think part of that is, she was left home alone with a kid, like, immediately after giving birth, because Oppenheimer's off in his lab.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. He gives it away to his good friend, who is also a known communist.
Commie!
At the time. And there, by the way, he's shown to be kind and loving, and immediately understands, like, it was so interesting to watch that scene where Oppenheimer shows up at his house with the baby and says, can you take this? And there's no questions. It's one of those things that you would want your friends, you want to be as a friend, loving, not asking any questions, not judging you, just saying yes. Yes, we'll take care of your child. Like, and there was an understanding of, hey, we already know your brokenness and we love you anyways. And that was like, that scene blew me away. But
it's then and there you learn that not all commies are bad commies.
I do like the portion of this movie of Oppenheimer that dwells in this kind of area of the hysteria of judgment.
Red Scare. It's
the Red
all
Scare.
around.
Yeah, McCarthy, it's definitely painted out to be a villain here. And I want to look at the rest of our society today and be like, yeah, see what judgment does? See what classifying everything good and bad does? It makes us crazy. But it is kind of wrapped up in this idea of the patriarchy. And that runs through both movies.
And horses.
Both movies, things they have horses.
When I discovered that the patriarchy wasn't about horses. Another great Ken line.
There is some really amazing stuff in Barbie. I'm not going to lie. The next thing they have in common, they're the title, the characters in both movies, deeply tortured by some truth that they can't fully realize. These movies are both the struggle to find these deep truths.
Existential dread is what I'm calling it.
Oh, man. Yeah, the existential dread of our brokenness in both cases. Barbie, I don't know that she ever gets there. That's my problem with the movie, is I don't think they ever get there. Oppenheimer, it would be interesting. It would have been interesting to talk to an old Oppenheimer to see where he was at.
So for me, as someone that studied religion and philosophy in college, I would say Oppenheimer's more Nietzsche and Barbie might be more Kierkegaard.
Wow.
And that
we could have spent the whole show talking about that.
Yes, that I think that Barbie, although she doesn't come to a full realization, she's wrestling with it. Mm-hmm. And honestly, life is just about wrestling with it.
Well, and a lot of, if these were philosophers, it would be totally fine that she never gets there.
Yep.
Because that's what philosophy is. You just keep wrestling.
And so, Team Barbie.
Also, the last thing on my list for what these movies have in common, we would be remiss if we did not mention the soundtracks for both movies. The bombastic pop world of Barbie is matched perfectly with the soundtracks.
Oh, that first song when she's waking up in her Barbie dream world. I'm like, this is a toe tapper.
Yeah.
/ it's hilarious.
As the kids say, it's a bop. And listen, I don't know. I don't know if it's good, right? Okay. So the composer of Oppenheimer, who is Ludwig Göransson.
I was going to say the one that did Tenet.
Yeah. He's very good. He's one of the best out there today. And what he's done for Oppenheimer is something unique. I think it's something different. I'm not here to know if it's good or if it'll be remembered as good or bad. I just know it was something. I was sitting through something. I was aware at points in Oppenheimer that I'm sitting through something that is very unique, and that's the score never stopped. So take the last 15 minutes of the Dark Knight Rises, another Christopher Nolan movie. Do you remember what he does with the score in that last 15 minutes of Dark Knight Rises? It's like slowly ratcheting up, even though the story is ratcheting down to this moment where Alfred sees Bruce Wayne in this cafe and they just share a look, and it all goes back to this conversation Alfred had with Bruce earlier in the movie. It pays off something.
It does.
But what was so fascinating about that entire end of that movie is the score ratcheting up as the story is ratcheting down. It's this very contrasting feeling. In this movie, in Oppenheimer, the score is slowly ratcheting up for almost the length of the movie. It never stops. It's constantly going. And it even adds in like this screeching violin at times that sounds like an air raid siren. It literally sounds like that. That was the first thing I noticed. It's very early on in the movie. And I just think what Nolan has done with the score in this movie is brilliant, genius, unique, and I'm not sure whether it's good or bad. I just know it's something amazing. It's an amazing achievement. I just don't know how to classify it yet.
I'm giving it all the Oscars.
Wouldn't shock me at all. But it also wouldn't shock me to have someone eviscerate it. Didn't work. I've already seen people saying they didn't like that the music's going on and the drums and all that. And I had trouble hearing the dialogue, blah, blah, blah.
Kick rocks, jabronis.
What do these movies not have in common? Well, only one of them had heinous Matchbox 20 slander. I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
Do I need to Google what Push by Matchbox 20 is about, what that song's about?
Please.
Give me something that they didn't have in common while I do it.
So Barbie was very bright color. Like, oh my goodness, like fluorescent everything. And then Oppenheimer at times, so courtroom scenes, it's in black and white. And in non-courtroom scenes, it's in color, but like the color's not like, oh, we're going to be bombastically bright. It is literally just kind of there as, I guess, it reminds me of like 1950s or 60s like television. Like it's just kind of bland. It's not like super vibrant. Like, oh my goodness, this is a sharp contrast.
Yep. Okay. So I've looked it up. So the song Push by Matchbox 20 is used as sort of a feminist anthem that's railing against the patriarchy, right? That's how, I mean, literally, am I wrong? I'm not being unfair. I mean, it's used as like, so the Kens, when the Kens are in charge, they all sing this song.
Yes.
Okay. They all play it acoustically. By the way, it's surrounded by very real patriarchal bad things. Like, so I want to defend the song and Matchbox 20's honor.
Someone needs to.
At least this is from Song Facts. At least one feminist group did try to ban this song back in the day, believing that it encouraged violence towards women. The ploy failed when the band explained that it was about emotional rather than physical confrontation. And actually, the lead singer Rob Thomas says that this is actually written from the perspective of an emotionally abusive ex-girlfriend. Thomas says the high school girlfriend who vengefully broke up with him by giving his clothes to charity. Thomas didn't have money to buy new clothes, so local bands helped him out by giving him t-shirts and other items. Over the next few months, he wore a lot of band t-shirts. But he says the whole song is from the perspective of an emotionally abusive ex-girlfriend. He told Genius, I was really writing about me. I was writing about someone who had manipulated me, but then instead of it being a victim song, I switched it around so that it was me manipulating someone saying, I want to push you around. So it was like damage he had taken and then
he transferred it.
Acted out from his human brokenness. All of that to be said, oh my gosh, this is another instance of how do we receive art? Who gets to say what the art's about?
Miranda Lambert does.
That's the correct answer. Miranda Lambert gets to say. So we'll have to ask her what that means.
And also just that Christopher Nolan did say the scenes that are in color are subjective and the black and white scenes are objective.
Whoa. Okay, wait. Explain that to me like I was 5.
That is a lot more difficult to do.
The scenes that are
scenes that are in color are subjective.
So they're from Oppenheimer's point of view. And the scenes
in black and white are objective.
That would be a historical reenactment. Interesting. Now I got to see it again. Why? That should have been on like a piece of paper they handed me at the movie theater. Why? I needed that information going into it.
Thank you, Film Facts, for sharing Christopher Nolan's explanation, which Nolan has been sharing a lot about this movie, which feels weird to me. And like he's been sharing a lot of like information about himself, which also feels weird to me because he hasn't always been like an open book. But like during the Dark Knight trilogy, especially from the Dark Knight to Dark Knight Rises, you're still dealing with the loss of Heath Ledger. And so like, there's a lot of like, we're going to be closed-lip about a lot of things. And it's just going to be strictly about what product's out right now.
Yeah. Another thing that they don't have in common, Barbie is a movie about indoctrination. Oppenheimer doesn't really deal with that, although it could have. But that's not what it's about. It's about Oppenheimer.
I did see a lot of, well, when I say a lot, I saw a post and then a lot of people comment like, well, why didn't they get the Japanese perspective on Oppenheimer? And I'm like, did you not see the very end of the movie where like as soon as the credits start, it says this film is based off the book American Prometheus. Yeah. And another Oppenheimer book. It really focuses on J. Robert Oppenheimer. Even Strauss, all his stuff is about Oppenheimer. It's not like, because when he gets interviewed, they could have asked him about his time of like being a leader in commerce and all that sort of stuff. But the movie doesn't focus on it. It focuses on his relationship with Oppenheimer. And so those are the only questions it shows is the questions about Oppenheimer when he's in front of the congressional hearing. So
I came across a tweet, and this is so Twitter. This may be the most Twitter thing ever, but it was a tweet that said basically Oppenheimer's a 3-hour movie and about, a bomb that was dropped on Japan, this cruel instrument of killing, of murder, and there's not one Japanese person in the movie.
You missed like a huge portion of the movie.
Right. And I actually quote tweeted it and said, I don't know what's parody and what's not anymore. I don't know if this guy's trying to make a joke or if he's being serious. I literally don't know. But if he's being serious, here's the problem. The problem is we live in this victim culture where we want to be the victim. We want to lift up the victim. And like, listen, this is not me not saying that the Japanese civilians that lost their lives in that weren't victims. They totally were. But when you play the victim and live in victim culture, you never get to the bottom of what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. You're never seriously looking to explore the brokenness of humanity to get to the bottom of what's actually happening. And that's the problem with victim culture. Listen, if you want to be in that culture, if you want to do that and pay tribute to victims, that's fine. I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas. They have a candlelight vigil for the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki every year. But that's surely not the only one. I'm sure that happens a lot in different places around the country. Go find yourself a candlelight vigil. If you want to get to the bottom of what this is all about and where the human brokenness, if you actually want to understand what's at fault here, then you can't live in the victim mentality.
/ I think an important scene in the movie is between Truman and Oppenheimer. That like Trinity in the Los Alamos Project, that's you, Oppenheimer. What happened in World War II to Japan, that's me, Truman. It's not about you anymore, bud.
Yeah.
Get this crybaby out of here.
Yeah. Right?
What she just say.
And that's the perfect representation of what's wrong with a victim culture. Like, there are people out there that are going to use the power of the world, the worldly power. And if you're stuck in victim culture, it's not going to grant you this power you think it does, because the other people out there using worldly power are just going to keep bombing on you.
Yeah. And which they make a point of saying Oppenheimer learned from that encounter with Truman, and he then was more politically savvy afterwards.
Yeah. So, and he, in the end, his wife was right. If you're not going to gain anything by being the martyr here. This is the difference between, this is the fascinating difference between worldly and kingdom, by the way. You're not gonna win in the world playing the martyr.
Nope.
So victim culture. Hello. Hi. You're not going to win by playing the victim, sitting in your hole and crying and occasionally lobbing bricks out of it. You're going to have to get out of your hole, try to diagnose what's really wrong with the world, and fight. You're going to have to get out of there. Victim culture is always, you're just always going to be the victim, and you're never really going to understand the world as it is. And I think that's a message there. But I started this all by saying that Barbie is a movie about indoctrination, which it is. They tried, they get so close to understanding the indoctrination that men grow up with. And that it's exactly the same as the indoctrination of females, just different outcomes. But it never quite gets there. It never fully realizes it. Because Ken and the men go back to being Kens. The Barbies are forever changed, right?
Yes.
It just never quite gets there. But I will say that Oppenheimer's not about indoctrination. It's taking place in a culture of indoctrination.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's in the background, but it's not like a movie about that. It's literally the time that Oppenheimer's in. There's definitely a patriarchy, and there's definitely all these things happening that would be indoctrinated, and also like patriotism. Holy cow. That is a big thing. Like, you can't be a fascist. You can't be a commie, because that will definitely affect your patriotism and loyalty to the country.
The last thing I have listed that they don't have in common, and this shouldn't be a surprise to fans of Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer is a very cerebral movie. Just the way it's put together, the way the narrative goes.
Literally, like, there's scenes that, like, my heart stops. And then, like, especially when the nuclear bomb Trinity test happens. Like, you see the mushroom cloud, and there's a long period.
Yeah, it's the one point in the movie where there's no music. It's silence.
And it is such a dramatic, like, it's a pregnant pause, as, like, I have heard many adults say in my youth. Like, it's so prolonged, and then boom.
Yeah.
It hits you. And
it's sort of a microcosm of the movie itself. I had to process this movie, my thoughts, before I could actually really have a conversation about it.
My wife, like, we're walking out of the movie, and she tries to, I think she can tell that I am processing, and so she's trying to find something to say, and she's like, well, I think that was phenomenal. And I'm like,
yeah,
it was.
We'll get there.
It was.
We're gonna have our bottom line thoughts about that movie.
But like I had to like really flush it out for the drive home, and then it worked.
Let's do an actor trade. Did you come up with one of these? Swap one actor from each movie and say why it makes each movie better. Did you have one?
So
It's okay if you don't.
The guy that plays in Shang-Chi,
Oh, Simu Liu.
like him, and maybe
Oh, please say you're saying Josh Hartnett.
you know that one wouldn't be bad.
Side note, it took me till after the movie to convince me that actually was Josh Hartnett.
I'm like, Josh has been off the radar and the beaten path for many moons.
And he's really good in the
Yes.
movie. And I'm like, that's part of the reason, because I don't like, look, I'm just going to be honest. I don't have a lot of respect for Josh Hartnett's acting ability. Pearl Harbor probably damaged that. Thanks a lot, Michael Bay. But in this movie, that actor, like that character, I'm like, this dude's going hard and he looks so much like Josh Hartnett. It's distracting me. And then like I had to convince myself that it actually was him, and it is him. He's amazing in this movie.
So the person I actually was going to trade him with was Rami Malek.
Okay.
Just because I think both of them, you're expecting them to do something big and like bold, and then like it takes forever for them to have their scene to shine.
Yeah. I was wondering what Rami Malek was doing in this role.
Literally, I had already projected in my mind that he was the loser of the movie, like 2/3 of the way through the movie. And then like the last 10 minutes happened, and I'm like, this is why this guy won an Oscar.
Yeah, he was great. He was fantastic.
Like before, you saw him twice. He didn't speak either time, and one of those times he drops a pin and is a bumbling idiot.
Yeah. My actor swap, and this probably does more for Barbie than it does for Oppenheimer, but you take Tom Conti, who played Albert Einstein, and you swap him with Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
So Tom Conti goes into the role of Mattel CEO, where immediately he lends more gravitas, acting gravitas, and you can play it a little bit straighter, which I feel like that needed. The real world needed to be less absurd to contrast with the Barbie world. And you move Will Ferrell over to the role of Albert Einstein, where Nolan can kind of put a clamp on him.
Oh, yeah.
And control him. And I think it would have made both movies better. I'm less convinced about the Oppenheimer side of that.
I am as well.
But I thought it would be a fun actor swap.
And literally every other actor swap I did in my mind, it would have been Barbie would have favored a lot better for the actor swap than Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer would have lost out. Because I'm like, can I replace America Ferrera with anyone?
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
And every time I did it, like, Oppenheimer suffered.
Glorious American Ferrera Slender.
Like, I don't dislike her as a person. I actually do like her quite a bit. And I just did not like Ugly Betty. Superstore, every other character I like just as much, if not more.
Yeah, her character in Superstore is awful.
I think if she was if she had more gravitas to her, like if Emily Blunt delivered her speech in Barbie.
Oh, man.
That
would have been a good actor swap, too.
I think that this would have landed, and I think that we are giving Barbie a different rating.
I think here's the interesting thing is the actor swap tends to favor Barbie every time.
Yeah.
Like swapping out an actor. Interesting. Although I don't think you swap out Gosling or Margot Robbie.
You don't, and you don't swap out Michael Cera.
Yes, he's fantastic in the movie. You also wouldn't obviously swap out Cillian Murphy. The leads of both of these movies are great and cannot be swapped.
Yeah. I'm not even swapping Florence Pugh, and her character was just there for like 10 minutes.
Yeah. We'll get to her. Who is the winner of Barbenheimer? Who's the winner?
Besides the fans.
Obviously, the fans.
I'll throw the fans out there. It is the man who said, I thought I had forgotten how to act for the past 10 years of Marvel projects I have done.
Marvel slander!
This is easily the best movie I've ever been in. Robert Downey Jr. is the winner of this movie.
No, Barbenheimer. The winner of Barbenheimer.
He's the winner of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't argue with this, by the way.
Literally, holy cow. For moments of the movie, I am more intrigued by Strauss than I am Oppenheimer. But then it goes back as soon as Cillian Murphy's on screen. But, like, literally, I'm thinking give Robert Downey Jr. his Oscar as Best Supporting Actor. Literally, I know several people thought he was joking about his Marvel comment. I think he's serious because literally the past 10 years of Marvel.
He's serious.
He's like, all you see is either his face because he's in the suit, or he's just walking around with food in his hand saying, Avengers, you guys need to fall in line right now or else.
I'm afraid that if you're beneath a certain age, you're not getting the full effect of who Robert Downey Jr. is. Robert Downey Jr. is one of the most fascinating figures in Hollywood in my lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
So Robert Downey Jr. makes it huge very young. So he's on Saturday Night Live. He's in these comedic movies. He's living life in the fast lane, and he's living too fast because he gets
too furious.
He's addicted to drugs. He ends up going to prison for a while. And he's lost to time for a little bit, where he's in prison and he's forgotten and he's just a tragic story. But then he comes back and he eventually, he starts off in these very like kind of movies that are not blockbuster movies, but movies that are remembered as like, man, that was a really good movie. And he was really good in it. And then he does Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which kind of reinvents him. And then he gets Iron Man.
Yep.
So he's fascinating in that he is this hugely visible guy now because of Marvel.
Which I will have to give Marvel props because my friend Chris Nolan, I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, I'm aware of.
He did say Marvel casting Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man is one of the greatest casting decisions in the history of cinema.
Agreed. Christopher Nolan nailed it. He did. Literally, it's the linchpin of their success. That they had to have the right guy as Iron Man to be the linchpin of all that. And they got it in Robert Downey Jr. Because here's the thing we all knew back when Robert Downey Jr. was young and he has that tragic fall, is his talent is limitless. The dude, we all thought he was going to be the star. Back when they're young, I think we all thought Robert Downey Jr. would be bigger than Tom Cruise. That obviously hasn't been the case, maybe until now. We understand the Robert Downey Jr.'s talent and all that. And so he's this fascinating figure to have gone the Marvel route and to be that kind of a star. And now people are probably surprised that, oh man, he can really act. Well, if you knew the whole story, you'd know that was always there. And so I do not argue at all with Robert Downey Jr. being the winner because this is sort of him getting back into acting.
Yeah. And he commands the screen during his acting.
The winner of Barbenheimer for me is Warner Brothers, and by effect also all Hollywood movie studios. They win on this because what they have done with this whole craze is bring people back into the theater. Warner Brothers was in the most desperate way, so that's why I put them a little bit above all the other studios. That they like. This is prayers answered for them. They needed this.
We made money.
I think this literally saves their studio. I had doubts of whether they would be a studio much longer because they were broke.
Allegedly.
So for me, the winner of the movie is Warner Brothers and Hollywood Studios. Who's the loser of Barbenheimer?
It's between two people that aren't even in either movie.
What?
Tomas Cruise,
Tom Cruise, man.
Mission Impossible gets pushed out of all IMAX
And forgotten.
and forgotten.
And it's a good movie.
Allegedly. I haven't watched it. I assume that it's like the other Mission Impossibles. It's a good summer blockbuster.
It's
fun
a very
movie.
impossible mission.
It is. The other loser, your favorite person, JC, James Cameron. Because the thing is,
I thought you were going to say Jesus.
no, Jesus is never a loser. He's a
No,
winner.
my favorite person. But you wouldn't call him the loser. I got you.
Yes. But literally, people were asking Christopher Nolan, did you really drop an atomic bomb? Because he said there's no CGI.
Yeah.
There is no CGI. And you get like the atomic level of the way atoms and electrons and neutrons and like all that's moving around throughout the movie. You get little snippets. You get the atomic bomb drop. You get so much, and like the way he sets things up. So one thing that we had talked about doing, probably don't have enough time, so I'll just throw it out there.
Yeah, we've gone so long already.
The scenes that are memorable, the gym speech when he's in the gym and he's like having a panic attack / like you contrast what they just did with the amount of patriotism that's happening. And then anytime Einstein and Oppenheimer are together and talking, especially at the end of the movie, holy cow, like that's masterful.
Yeah.
Take a directing class, James Cameron and Avatar.
Yeah. Do I even have to say how much a better of a filmmaker than Chris Nolan is than James Cameron? Like James Cameron, like, listen, I know James Cameron, he's like James Gunn. He'd probably argue with us on Twitter if we posted this. Maybe we should to get the followers to go viral, because it's not even close how much better Nolan is than Cameron. This movie's amazing. It's amazing. I do not disagree with your loser. My loser of Barbenheimer is Florence Pugh.
What?
Listen, what did she just go through with Don't Worry, Darling? It was over-sexualized. She goes on record railing against that. Like she wants to be known for her acting. Then she goes straight into what may be one of the best movies of all time. I'm going to get to that. And she's over-sexualized. In my opinion, it's the one misstep of Oppenheimer is that Nolan, who's like, it's fair to say this is the first time he's ever delved into this part of filmmaking. And I think he just goes a little too far with the nature of her scenes. And I feel like poor Florence Pugh, who is by all accounts super talented, is the one misstep of Oppenheimer, and it's not her fault.
So I think the times that she's speaking,
she's great.
Oh yeah, and for me,
but you know what I'm saying? It doesn't make her the center of the scene. It makes her nudity the center of the scene.
Well,
that's a disservice to her.
So I didn't take her nudity being the center of the scene. I always took the relationship.
But that is objective.
It is.
To the viewer, and you know that most people are going to be so thrown off by that it is going to be the center of the scene.
Because at one point during his appeal to get back his credentials, because it's cut into their naked prolonged scene, she's like on top of him during this as he's talking about like his relationship with this woman.
Yeah.
And
listen,
so like for me, it artistically worked. I know other viewers will be like, oh, she was just naked. And that was really weird that she was in this scene.
I'm not saying I cannot disconnect. I can disconnect and compartmentalize and say that what her work in the movie is fantastic. I'm not saying she's the loser of the movie because she did a poor job. I'm saying that to the vast majority of the movie going public, like this is why I feel like it's such a misstep on Nolan's part to make it so graphic, was I immediately start trying to figure out why. Why did you do this? Why did you go this far? And the only conclusion I can come up with is we just wanted to see Florence Pugh naked.
So he commented on this.
Okay, what did he say?
He said, during my research of Oppenheimer, it literally was a pivotal moment. This character or this mistress that he had, like, this is a life-altering moment, especially when she dies.
Yeah.
And so...
And that's portrayed well.
That he remembers the last night that he was with her, that he remembers it fondly, but it's something that haunts him. Mm-hmm. And it haunts his marriage. And so, like, he wanted to portray the gravitas of that affair on Oppenheimer.
And that is portrayed well in the movie, but in it, I feel like by taking it so far, you do a disservice to the actress, Florence Pugh. That's just my stance. And, like, look, it's okay. We can disagree on this, but I feel like that it does a disservice to Florence Pugh and her acting ability. But he does what he says, the way he describes that, he does a good job of painting it. It's haunting his character. I just feel like poor Florence Pugh, who just came out of a trash movie like Don't Worry, Darling, and she's busting on it for maybe the same reasons that the one misstep of Oppenheimer, in my opinion, is those scenes. And because I think it is an important story that people should see. And, like, hey, if you got teenagers, you might want to VidAngel it.
Potentially.
But you're going to miss some things. Okay.
Rating.
Bottom line. What are we rating these movies? Cody.
Okay.
How many out of 10 for each movie and why?
Oppenheimer, 9.9. It's almost a perfect movie. It might be a perfect movie. I don't know. I will just dock it for kicks and giggles.
Because it feels weird to give something a 10.
Because, holy cow, it's the best Christopher Nolan movie. I said it right after I walked out. Literally, the way it portrays Oppenheimer as, like, yeah, highly intelligent, but very broken.
The quote in the movie is, "How could this man that saw so much be so blind?" That's a quote from the movie that someone says to Oppenheimer. And yeah.
And I do love that they do use Oppenheimer's quote, which is a quote from the sacred Hindu text. I am death, destroyer of worlds. The historical nature of it was phenomenal. He nailed it. And the cast, holy cow, the cast is great. Barbie, an 8.
An 8. Okay.
Maybe an 8.5. Anytime Barbie is with Ruth Handler, those scenes are, oh my goodness, very amazing. Standout, which is played by Rhea Perlman.
We could have done a whole episode on the biblical implications of Barbie and her creator. Those scenes alone.
Literally. And then the scene with Barbie and the older lady at the bus stop was powerful because the older lady has a sense of identity and sense of self-worth, which most of the characters in this movie struggle with.
Yeah.
And so it was very good that way. The cast of this is phenomenal. Like, if Oppenheimer hadn't come out, I'd say this might be the best cast lineup of the year. But Oppenheimer came out, and holy cow, give Oppenheimer casting director all the monies because they nailed it.
Yeah. I'm going to start with Barbie, and I'm going to give it a 6. I could vary in between a 6, 6.5. I think it's a good movie. I think the framework and the ideas they had could raise it up to a 9. Like, I think it's all there. I just don't think it quite sticks the landing on all the deep things it's trying to say. I just don't think they quite get there with a lot of it. And then in the end, it kind of flounders back into this kind of girl power-ish type of messaging, which is fine. I have daughters. Like, look, and they saw the movie, and I'm good with that. But I feel like it had a chance to do something really profound, and it just misses. It just misses. So that's where I'm at with Barbie. Oppenheimer. Oh man, I'm gonna go with you. It's a 9.9. There are only a few movies where, when at the end of the movie, when the credits roll, I've gotten emotional. Not because of where the scene landed at the end, just because when the credits roll, I realized I have just viewed something profound. I felt this way at the first time I watched Shawshank Redemption. The credits roll and you realize you've watched something so profoundly well done. And I nearly started crying in the theater when the credits started rolling in Oppenheimer, because it is almost a perfect movie. It immediately when I left the theater, I knew this is one of my top movies of all time. I think it's a top 10 movie of all time. I think the only misstep of the movie is he overreaches on the nude scenes with Florence Pugh. I think there was a purpose. I think I can see his purpose. I can see his reasoning, and I can say that makes sense to me. I just feel like his inexperience in doing those scenes, he kind of overreaches on it, and it's the one imperfection in a perfect movie for me. I think this movie is exquisite, that it encapsulates human brilliance, ingenuity, and our perpetual brokenness all in one, the intersection of that. And I think it's a movie that everybody should see. And your level of botheredness or being bothered by nudity will tell you how you need to view it, right? If you need to skip past those scenes, vid-angel it, whatever, however you do it, I think this movie is extremely important. And this story is important to study for teenagers, people going into the world, because I think the one thing our world really grapples with and has a problem with is this idea of good and bad and judgment and how we judge all that. And it totally, human brokenness gets lost. And what I mean by that is this movie is a perfect exploration of human brokenness just is, and that some things are just going to happen. And at the end of the day, we can't really point fingers at each other for that. That's where I'm at. And I think this movie is beautiful in its description of those things. So I'm giving Oppenheimer a 9.9, just like Cody. And now that was me. That's what I wanted to say about Oppenheimer. I think it's incredible. An incredible achievement. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. What did you guys think of Barbenheimer? It's a momentous event. This is going to be one of our longest episodes ever, and maybe it should be, because I think this is like a groundbreaking, one-of-a-kind thing that happened with these two movies. What did you think of all that? What did you think of the mass hysteria about it? What did you think of the movies individually? What did you think of the themes we discussed here? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know on our social media posts, on our Facebook and Twitter pages for these episodes. If you don't follow them, you should. If you don't subscribe to the podcast, you should. If you haven't reviewed us or rated us, you should. It helps us out. It grows the community, and it allows us to do more things in the long run. Thank you so much for listening. We love all you guys, and we'll see you next time. Pop Culture Pastor.